What's up, Psychedelic Gypsies? I am here with Raw of Earth, and he is someone I've been following for a very long time. He's a really interesting guy, was into the CrossFit world, owned CrossFit gyms, and now is a certified Kundalini yoga teacher and is marrying the world of fitness and yoga and spirituality with Kriya of the Week, which is a membership website to practice chanting, breath work, meditation, and kind of just get introduced to like something, a very broad subject. And he also sells some nutrition products that he very much believes in. So welcome, Ra.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, Emily.
Yeah.
I've known about you for a really long time. You're pretty popular in the sport of CrossFit, so I've been watching you and following you for a long time as well.
Yeah, and what's funny is that this is kind of full circle for me because I remember my older sister used to live in LA, downtown.
Oh
And
yeah?
yeah, and one day I was really getting into CrossFit at the time and I was visiting her. And so I went to your gym early in the morning for a class. And I was walking down the streets of LA and there's like hobos everywhere, crackheads everywhere. And I walk into this gym and it's like this old dilapidated building, but it's like a sick CrossFit space. And you were like one of the coaches of the class and you actually coached me.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I was like, oh shit, like, because I had read about Ronnie Teasdale and I was like, oh shit, he's like coaching me. And I remember we were doing push press and I was wearing like a tank top to work out
Uh-huh.
and I hadn't shaved my armpits like in a while. And you were like, like really close to me. And I was like super embarrassed at the time, like 5, 6 years ago. It's like, oh my God, I didn't shave my armpits. Like I could give a shit now, but it was just funny. Like I just remember that experience with you, but you probably don't remember it.
Uh, no, but that's awesome. That's awesome you got the gym because that gym, I mean, that was my dream, perfect manifestation. But yeah, the crown molding and the high ceilings and the holes in the walls and the graffiti everywhere and the homeless people outside. Yeah, it was an awesome experience.
Totally. It was called CrossFit Mean Streets.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was super cool.
It was originally CrossFit Skid Row, but I had to change it because there was another gym that used that title, so I let them have that because it
Yeah.
was one block away from Skid Row where there's like thousands of tents and people sleeping in them every single night.
Yeah, such a crazy world, that Skid Row. It's like its own community, its own society.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna turn down the volume because I heard some feedback.
Oh, okay, thanks. So yeah, what I wanted to talk to you about was your transition from CrossFit to your current lifestyle, because I feel like you've gone through this huge transformation as someone who's interested in health and wellness. And from, kind of this meathead CrossFitter, you were much more muscular.
Mhm.
Now you've definitely taken this yogi route, not trying to label you because I feel like you're kind of labelless. But yeah, I just wanted to talk to you about that whole transition. What precipitated it?
Yeah, so it's been more of a revealing than a transition.
Hmm.
I have a degree in psychology and exercise science. So from the very beginning, I was interested in uh, the parts of us, like the mind and the body, because back then that's all I really thought there was. Um, I started off not really believing in religion, just kind of none of that exists, and then getting into spirituality and the metaphysical stuff. So through psychology, I was really disappointed at the college courses, and so I didn't buy any of the textbooks, and I ended up studying all this stuff on my own, and that led me into finding practices like meditation and deep sort of mystical practices having to do with manipulation of the environment and reality and other people in it and within ourself. And so all of these things were kind of sort of underlying everything that I outwardly projected, which when I moved to California after graduating college, I opened a gym. And from a client level, from a teacher to client level, sometimes this stuff would come out. But for me, the way that I was competing, the way that I was training, all had roots in more of Eastern traditional standpoints. It's just you can't really talk about this stuff until about 2017. So around 2017, what I noticed in my reality was that everybody became open to the concepts of consciousness. I know that there's been people involved in these realms forever, but at least in the circles I was running in, like the health food stores and the gym scene, people started becoming open to the non-physical realities in 2017. So around that time is where you start seeing my public display of knowledge start shifting towards that. But it's been something I've been into for a really long time. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of the shift from CrossFit to there has a lot. It's a big transition, and it would take a long time to explain. But essentially, I was competing in CrossFit. I made it to regionals like every single year. Never made it to the games every year, but 1 year, the whole like out of 7 years. And I was doing really well despite me having a lot of injuries. And the injuries that I have almost forced me not to train. So I had to figure out how to be able to show up to a competition and do well without having the benefit of physical training. And what I found was that there's other ways to harness energy besides making yourself stronger, besides adapting to exercise, right? So how we train in a gym, we make ourselves mechanically adaptive to physical stress. We stress our body, the body adapts to that. Well, there's other ways that we can make ourselves more powerful besides adapting to stress, right? So adapting to stress is kind of a breaking down and then rebuilding up. Well, there's ways we can just build up. And I found those ways to be much more efficient, and I kind of accidentally found those ways. Mm-hmm. Because I was stressed out at the gym, I was hanging out at the beach a lot. Just literally laying down at the beach, maybe mobilizing a little bit, but mostly just decompressing from the stress of owning multiple gyms and teaching people exercise all day long. And so I was exposing myself to sunlight, I was earthing, I was getting in fresh air that was blowing off the Pacific Ocean. I was also just right next to the waves and the water crashing right there, lots of water in the air. I also was like just consuming the best nutrition and drinking the best water. And when we look at these ancient cultures, we see that sunlight, earth, air, water are like the elements, right? And when we fulfill our body with these things, we actually make ourselves more powerful. And like I said, this was an accident. I would show up to competitions where the open would roll around every single year, and there would be people I would be coaching all year long. My coaches, or I was even coaching another gym owner one year, pretty popular athlete, and the open would roll around, and I hadn't touched a barbell in 4 months, and I would do the open workout with my athletes and beat them. And it never really made sense to me or anybody else. So it wasn't until I closed my gyms that I started researching and studying about how and why all of this was happening. And so we can get into that, but essentially I was forced to not work out, not train because of my injuries, because I played hockey my whole life, and my shoulders are destroyed and my spine is destroyed from a chiropractor injury. I've got dead nerves in my body. I've got torn ligaments all over my body. And I just found that I could somehow win competitions based purely on like the harnessing of chi.
Okay. And that's, well, okay, first question. Why did you close your CrossFit gyms?
Well, when I started realizing, there's a few different reasons, but essentially I wasn't working out in my gym. And so it becomes boring when I am kind of personally somewhere else. Like my mind is evolving on a different branch of the tree, and fitness is over here, and I'm sort of developing concepts and theories having to do with non-physical realities and non-physical subtle energetic parts of ourselves. And then I had to come into work every day and teach people how to do push-ups. They're all related, but my clients actually, I started having them meditate. I started having them work out with their eyes closed, and they weren't that into it, you know? They just wanted to kill themselves with thrusters and pull-ups. And so I just kind of felt not in alignment with it. And so eventually my reality structured itself to closing down the gyms. There's a lot more things that happened in there, but essentially the way that was intended to close my gyms is because I just wasn't into it anymore. I'd owned gyms for 10 years.
I see.
I closed, and that's a long time.
Yeah, that's a long time. A time for a shift, for sure. And it's funny because like I was training in Calgary, not getting a ton of sunlight for a long time, moved down to San Diego, started running on the beach, trained way less, was having like amazing sex, and I was the best I had ever been. And it was because I kind of like let go of outcomes, and all of a sudden I was like I think I was tapping into something that the universe wanted me to tap into, and then kind of gave me that spiritual 2x4 to explore more. So what I wanted to ask you was, I felt this chi, or whatever you want to call it, like this life force vitality. And sometimes it's come in this experience of the snake, right? This Kundalini energy. And I wanted to know if like, how can you tap into that on a daily basis? And have you felt that energy like coursing through you? Because obviously that was like, you were meant to shift this way. You were meant to like reorganize your reality so that your spirit could come through and start explaining these things to people on a mass scale. And that's super accessible. So I kind of wanted to start talking about like your Kundalini energy and what you've learned through.
So in some cultures, it's referred to as a snake, or the Kundalini, like the serpent, the coil at the base of your spine. In some cultures, it's a dragon. Dragons breathe fire, so that heat is energy, right? And so all over the world, there's different ways to explain this same thing. And yes, there are definitely ways to enhance and grab a hold of this all day long, and it manifests in different ways. Sometimes if there's a complete opening, sometimes called the Kundalini awakening, you can have a channel open, connecting yourself to source, like infinite intelligence is sometimes the way that it's labeled. And people have superpowers. I personally know people that like are supernatural. They have knowledge that goes, it transcends what should be possible. And it's because they're in complete alignment, and this energy is flowing, connecting the base of their spine to their higher centers, to the pineal gland. So there's different levels at which we can harness this energy. From a basic life force energy center, we can think about this energy as our power. And when we're in the womb, we're getting all of our energy from the umbilical cord, right? And that's coming in through our navel center. And that's why we have a belly button there, because that's the scar of the umbilical cord. So when that umbilical cord is snipped off, now we've got a little entity, a little baby that has to now come up with the solution to harness energy that was coming into the navel center. And the navel center, basically the core of your body, down low by your belly button, but it's in the front and the back. It's a little bit below your belly button. This place is where we store our chi. This is where we store and that comes in the form of air, right? So when we breathe, it goes into that center. It comes in the form of food. When we eat, it goes into that center. When we have sex, the energy created during that is down there in that center. So a lot of life force comes from this part of our body, and we want to make sure that that part of our body is strong and balanced in order to be able to pump that energy throughout the rest of our body. And that's essentially the answer to your question, is that our navel center has to be capable of unification of the lower parts of our body and the upper parts of our body, the left and the right parts of our body, and then the physical and the non-physical parts of our body. And when the navel center is strong and united, then we can flow this energy out through our capacities.
Okay, and so how do we make sure our navel center is strong?
Yeah, so with a lot of this stuff, there's multiple dimensions, right? So what I would first start with is food, right? Mm-hmm. Because our gut actually houses many neurons. And so there's a gut-brain connection, which is an example of us getting energy from food and then us feeding our entire body through this channel of neurons. And it's coming in through the food. And the food is essentially stored sunlight, stored earth, stored water, and stored air. That's what food is. So either that's what make up the plants, or that's what the animals eat the plants and then transfer that, and we eat the animals and transfer that energy into us. So there's dietary concerns regarding that, but the more interest, which we all know, right? And we can talk about that. But if the gut's messed up, it's really going to mess up our ability to be a clear, open channel. And we can get into that later. But the more interesting part is the embryonic sort of power that we get inside the womb, and we can refacilitate that with breath. And when we breathe correctly and we're using diaphragmatic movements, we can stimulate the organs down there and stimulate the flow of prana through our nose and our mouth into that center. So breath work is a whole new sexy thing now, because of the benefits people receive from it. Wim Hof has made pranayama very, very popular, and it's just like one type of breath work. I think he's added a couple, but there's hundreds or there's thousands of different types of breath work, and they all have a different effect on our body when we do them.
Now I see that you are really into breath of fire. And would you be able to like explain that to people, and why are you drawn to that one particularly?
So, breath of fire is an overall good cleansing breath, and it's a good activating breath. So it does a lot of things. And essentially, if you pant like a dog, like the, and then just close your mouth, you're doing breath of fire. And when we pant like a dog, we're focusing on the exhale. So we pull that diaphragm muscle in on the exhale, and it forces the exhale out our mouth or our nose. When we're doing breath of fire, it's supposed to be out the nose, and then we relax the diaphragm and then the inhale happens automatically. So it's a sharp exhale and then a relaxing inhale. And that sharp exhale really, it expels physical and non-physical bad energy out of the body. So normally when we're breathing, we might not be completely exhaling. And when we do breath of fire, that's definitely a complete exhale of the stagnant air that could be in our lungs and the stagnant energy that could be in through our entire system. Also, there's the navel center. I mentioned the belly button. The actual navel center, our actual physical and energetic center, is about 2 inches below the belly button. And when we're doing breath of fire, that's the point that's popping in and out. And at that point, it's said that there's 72,000 nadis or channels of energy meeting right there at the navel center. And when we're stimulating it physically, we're pumping the body with energy. And there's a really good pose that CrossFitters do called hollow position. where the arms are over the head and the body is hollowed out.
Mm-hmm.
Bring our arms from overhead directly to our sides so that it's a little bit easier to do, and then do breath of fire. This will be very exhaustive to a CrossFitter, even though we're in such good shape. But if we try and hold hollow position while doing breath of fire for 1 to 3 minutes, if you can do it for 3 minutes, then like everyone should work up to 3 minutes, but this will make you strong. You will see that if you try this and you've been going to the gym, it's very difficult, and there's potentially a kink in your armor if you're unable to do it for 3 minutes. So that's a good exercise everyone should try, is hollow position while doing breath of fire. And you'll see that the capacity of your abdominal strength right now could be better by being in hollow position and then just pumping.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I remember like my coach I was working with last year, she noticed a lot of CrossFitters, we breathe up here, like in our scalenes and our chest. And it was, and I kept getting like neck issues and jaw issues from all this like heavy breathing up in this area. So then she started to make me practice belly breathing and like deep, long cycle breathing, just where I move my low belly. And I could see an actual shift in like my training and how much better I got at being able to manage my heart rate and just manage breath in general. So it was really cool. And I mean, that's like one small portion of me like diving into this whole world of breath work.
Yeah.
It was go ahead.
I want to say one thing about that. I know I'm talking a lot.
No, I love it. You talk all that you need to talk.
So thank you. The thing with the navel center is that's where our power is. And if we think about power versus force, so I like to explain our mind and our head is where we generate force. And so the more power we have, the less force we need, right? Or if we don't have a lot of power, if we don't know how to use our body in a powerful way, then we need a lot of force. And that's where that like that breath up here is us forcing that air in. One of my favorite breath work things to do is actually not work at all. You just close your eyes, you sit in a comfortable position or lay down and watch your body breathe on its own. Because our unconscious is so much stronger than our conscious mind, and our body will breathe on its own. You observe the inhales versus the exhales versus the hold at the top of the inhale, the hold at the bottom of the exhale. Your body has its own rhythm, and when we allow our body to be in its own rhythmic state, it's going to allow our body to operate optimally as it wants to. So in the middle of a workout, we can also do that. We can observe our breath, we can observe our body needing air and let it pull air how it wants to pull air, and you'll become the most powerful form of yourself, rather than you thinking that you're going to give the body more air because it's better. So the simple practice of observing your breath in a rested state and then eventually working up to observing your breath in a more intense state will allow your body to adjust properly on its own and not having you kind of fight against it with the mind, and be able to harness more of your natural power.
It's so crazy because as a society, like the more I learn about this whole world is that it's all about just dropping into our body. Our body is so intelligent. Our emotional body is so intelligent, yet we always try to override it with the mind because we live up here so much. And the more I like drop down into my body, it's like, it's kind of uncomfortable, like sitting with like emotions or discomfort or pain, and then just like, but letting the body take over. It's like a very much a trust thing, like doing that.
Yeah. And getting to know yourself.
Yes.
Because things like pain and like it's part of the show, it's part of why we're here.
Right.
And if we can become comfortable with the ups and downs of life, then we can reduce the suffering.
Yes.
the suffering happens when we're attached to outcomes and then they don't happen. And you're just kind of like outside of the present moment, as opposed to being here now.
That's so, yeah, very succinctly put. And I wanted to ask you, have you ever used breath work during a sexual experience?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yes. Yeah. So I'm not completely, I've got a few different tactics, but there's like just simply doing breath of fire. And then there's some Egyptian, during orgasm, and then even in the Kundalini world, there's a cyclical breathing.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly for me, it's around the point of orgasm that I'm working with currently. And I'm also not retaining my seminal fluids currently right now. I have in the past, but right now I'm working with kind of letting my energy go outside of myself and then recycling it back in through intention and through breath. And this is mostly like some Egyptian sex magic stuff.
Totally. And the more I get into like sex magic and just reading about this world, like it's even about like the Nordics used to like create like some kind of symbol that they wanted that like represented what they wanted to happen in the future, what they wanted to manifest. And then they would imagine that during sex. And I've started to do this, and it's like the sexual energy it's such a healing energy, and it's at the base of who we are. And things are starting to happen and like open up the more that I open up and like get into my body during that experience. Whereas previously I was very much up in my head or was just like, oh, this is just sex. But now I'm seeing like the power behind the sex. And it's really cool. It's like I'm tapping into something that I never knew about. And it's interesting because I think as a society we're so disconnected from knowing ourselves. We're so disconnected from knowing our needs, which are very much universal. And then when we have emotions that are saying like, hey, you have an unmet need, we have no idea how to like distill that or handle that. And essentially handling the ups and downs of life. Because life is like waves of consciousness is just it is such a roller coaster, really. So I was going to ask you, how do you sit with uncomfortable emotions when they come up? Anger, fear, shame, guilt.
So I look at emotions like tools, because emotions are energy in motion. That's what that word means. And they're not ever negative. They just are. I mean, you could even make the argument that they're not positive. However, for lack of a better words, we can just say that like everything's happening perfectly as it should, and that sounds like a positive statement, as it should. But for me, no matter what's happening, so first I want to state that there's many different lenses for which we can view this reality. And I also think that reality itself is really fluid. And so when we're speaking, I'm speaking through a particular lens, and I want to make it clear that I have many of these lenses that I can look through. And I believe that everybody should gather different perspectives for which they can view reality, because it gives a multi-dimensional perspective of life. And that's like the difference between a black and white world and a color world. If we can understand that what we're perceiving means different things that might contradict each other, then we can sort of start to see through reality and in and out of dimensions. So with all that said, I just wanted to preface that this isn't the only way I look at things, but it'll be the most correlative to the way that you asked the question. Okay, so the way that I sort of mostly view reality is that it's like we are a subject within this reality, and any perception that I have is my own perception, right? It's everybody's own perception. So when we get happy or we get fearful or anxious or angry, these things are happening for us and for us to experience, for us to observe. And when we can take that stance, kind of a neutral stance, we can then realize that all there is now, right? There's only now. 10 minutes from now is still going to be now, but there's no real such thing as the future or the past. So when you do things like CrossFit or run a marathon or run an ultra marathon or hold your breath underwater or go into an ice bath or meditate or even do psychedelics, what's happening is we're dissolving the attachment that we have to the past and the future, and it brings us closer into the present moment of now. And the more practice we have at that, the more that we're able to experience our energies, experience our emotions with a present state. Kind of like if you're on a roller coaster, you're going up and down, you're completely focused on whether you're going up or down. And there's not so much focus on 2 minutes from now and worrying or calibrating what now means to 2 minutes from now. You're just completely focused on now. And so when the ups and downs of life come into my life or into people that I'm helping's lives, the answer is always to be present. Always being present and just focusing on the beauty of it, the perfection of whatever's happening. Mm-hmm. And that prevents suffering because you're not resisting it. It just is, right? Like we all watch, I like to speak in we's because I don't really view myself as separate from reality. So I'm going to say we, even though it doesn't really apply to me, but we all watch movie and TV shows where the characters are experiencing massive shifts in emotional, in just dramatic scenes, right? That's what TV is. And we as a people, we as a society have almost replaced our life with that. But if we can use that as a metaphor, it's like we're comfortable watching somebody on screen going through all of this stuff. We can transfer that into our own life and view our own life like a movie and have the same amount of comfort that we have when we're watching somebody try and save the world and having a hard time doing it. We can have that same amount of comfort through our own individual hero's journey or life story. And that's like, it's a grand show that all of us are living.
Yeah.
I mean, it's way more exciting than the TV shows, I think.
Even in the mundane, ordinary, day-to-day grind.
Yeah. And actually, I was reminded of that. I was doing Qigong outside the other day, and I wasn't leading it. A friend of mine was, and he was having us do this thing for so long. And so my brain started thinking like, all right, like, this is like, what are we doing? Like, it's Saturday morning, the sun's on me, and I'm doing this stork walk for like over 10 minutes. Like, I think I've gotten enough out of this. And then when I started thinking about that, it triggered another part of my mind to be like, hey, what do you do? Like, this is the practice. And then then I just like allowed my muscles to start burning, right? Because that's kind of what started it, is I was getting tired of doing the same movement. I allowed my muscles to start burning. I started seeing the grass. The grass became greener. The air became brighter. Everything just got way better, even though I was experiencing pain, where my mind was kind of resisting it. And then when I shifted to like, hey, this is where you are now, experience it fully, it just, everything dissolved away. And it was like I just like literally turned the tuner switch up on my experience. Everything got brighter.
That's super dope. And I think it's really interesting because one of the reasons I started Psychedelic Gypsy Fitness is because I believe right now we don't have this positive view or a positive role model of, I guess I would call it like feminine essence leadership, which is to slow down, to be where you are right now, to not just rush around, not busy up your life and your schedule, and not just manage life, but actually experience it and be connected to it. And I feel like for a lot of us, for a lot of women, because we live in a culture where slowing down isn't an option, that means that we've also suffered like sexually, because female sexuality is like hot water starting to boil, or sorry, water starting to boil, right? And so circling back to like the sexuality part of this is that, like, how do you make sure that by doing these practices, this Kundalini, this Qigong, like all of these things, have you found that you're able to experience more pleasure sexually as well? Not just like out in life, like seeing all the colors are brighter, but also are your sexual experiences much brighter and much more pleasurable, more expansive because of this slowing down?
Yeah. Also, because sex, the actual physical act of sex, it's not only like, that's not the entire sexual experience, right? There's the meeting and the energetic sort of bond, the meeting of the masculine and feminine that's happening before the clothes are off, and that part is extremely enhanced when you completely understand yourself and are a full spectrum male or a full spectrum female or anything in between that.
Mm-hmm.
When you really have identity and management over all of your capabilities, you can show up as a full partner, and then your partner can show up as a full partner, and it's really an explosive sort of meeting from the start. And then when we're talking about like physical penetration, there's when we start to know ourselves, there's different modes of operations. Like I mentioned lenses earlier, there's also different modes of operation. You mentioned just having sex, right? That term, just having sex. And that kind of refers to just like a lower level energy system or chakra meeting of genitals, where the energy is just kind of going very, very low in the body, like pelvis to pelvis. And it's a very earthing, very physical experience. And when we understand the openness of ourself and the connectedness that we have to nature and our environment, and a sexual activity, that energy moving from partner to partner can start flowing up into the heart center. And that heart center, if we're connected to our heart and we know how to use our heart is an electromagnetic resonator that's casting out a field of energy into our environment. It's harmonizing with everything in our home. It's harmonizing with the people that we interact with. It's harmonizing with the earth. It's harmonizing with the sun. And as fields, when two fields meet, they start to balance each other out. So two fields become one field. And when we have this knowledge, this connectedness to our heart center, a sexual act, we can start to actually merge energies, heart to heart, as opposed to genital to genital. And it's a different feeling, right? And as we start, like maybe through meditation, or maybe just through living and walking through the woods, as we start allowing ourselves to experience a grander version of ourselves. So talking about like where, like all of this, like the pineal gland connection, like where the information comes into our head. I view us more as like receivers of energy rather than just kind of independent uh, bodies that is kind of self-contained. I view our spine as more of an antenna, and we're receiving etheric energy. And so when we have connection to that, a sexual union that energy transfer can be going up into our higher centers and casting out into the universe, and sex can become a more of a universal connection. And that's essentially, I wouldn't say the goal, because there's not a goal, but in anything that we do, in anything that we do, if we're doing it at the greatest level, it's transcending our physical body, and we're able to tap into something up here. Anything, whether it's sex, whether it's sports, whether it's singing. So if you imagine Michael Jackson on stage, people are bursting out into tears. There's hundreds of thousands of people watching him, all experiencing this emotion. It's because he's able to, through the act of singing, transmute his energy into the field, which is then received from everybody who's got their eyes locked onto him, eyes and ears and being locked onto them. And he's actually able to not only give a transcending and ascended performance, but he's able to take everybody in the audience and bring their levels, bring their vibration up to a point where they're all sort of universally connected. So with that said, if you are a full spectrum being, a sexual experience can allow even your partner, who might not even be well practiced, if it just takes one of you, to raise that energy up, so that you're both tapping into energies that are greater than yourselves as individuals.
Absolutely. And what's crazy is that on my journey of like coming back to myself, like that revealing that you were talking about, my self-pleasure like situations or rituals have become so much more powerful, because I light candles, I take time, I do breath work, and I've had experiences, like such healing experiences from that self-sexual experience, that I'm like, I know there's something to this. Like I felt like the Kundalini uncoiling in my body. My nipples were hard for like a week. And I was like, there's something here and I wasn't just like ovulating, So it's like, there's something very powerful around like our sexual experience. And I was going to ask you, in terms of like making sure our chakras are open, where does one start to, open those things up? Because I feel like throughout all the chakras, there's something I could probably work on. But where does one start? Like just in the base chakras or the heart center? Or what's your thoughts on that?
So I think the physical body is definitely attached to these subtle energy centers. And so if we've got an overdeveloped, and I'm assuming that a lot of your audience are gym people, and if we've got an overdeveloped sort of muscular armor on us, I'm definitely not saying that muscle is bad or we should not have it. But what we want to make sure that we have is a flow of current, right? Because like we call money currency, and really currency is just a symbol of energy, and that energy comes from us. And so the ability for our body to flow current through ourselves is going to make us more valuable of a person, and more valuable, and have a more valuable experience. So I think the first thing is that it's not necessarily like a single chakra or energy system should be focused on, more that the connection of them all should be freed up. And starting with the physical body and noticing if our body structure doesn't operate properly. The joints are where a lot of these flows of energy happen. And it's not just flows of mystical energy that we're talking about. Flow happens here. There's nerves going through here. There's lymph going through here. So we want to make sure that our joints have full range of motion everywhere. So even just simply like if we're just moving our wrists and fingers around, if we haven't done this stuff, reaching, connecting it to our neck, we can just sort of like move our body around as a warm up even to exercise or just a warm up to the day. Make sure our spine is undulating really good, like we're seaweed in an ocean. That will allow our body current to flow without impedance. And when we have blockages, that's kind of the definition of sickness and disease, is a blockage in the energy flow. So I would start with just making sure that the physical structure is aligned and able to mobilize. Like for instance, this forward shoulder position that we get because we're trying to do a lot of pushing, this is gonna physically block off our heart center. We're building a cage around our heart center rather than being in a more open position. And even from looking at somebody perceptually, we can see that the difference between this and this is a lot different. And every single person around you are responding to that difference.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's really interesting. So do you think, because when I was training CrossFit at that kind of elite level, I felt numbed out a lot. So how do you physically, or like ask your body, like, what do you need today? Because I find a lot of times we're always shoulding ourselves, like I should work out today. I should do what's on the program today, instead of actually, again, dropping into our body. So how do you gauge what you need on any given day?
So it's always a juggling of all these things, right? And I prioritize. So one of the reasons, like the main reason why I closed my gym, just to go back to answer a question a little bit more fuller, is when I opened my gym, I assumed wrongly that diet and exercise were the base, were the foundation of health. That's what I thought. And through owning a gym, through experience, through knowledge, I found out that there's actually a foundation underneath diet and exercise. And those are the elements that I mentioned before: sunlight, earth, air, water, and you can even add the fifth element of ether, which we tap into like in a flow state or a meditation or just being conscious. And these are what I view as fundamental. So for me, connecting with nature is my priority. And if I can work out outside, if I can do something outside, then at least I'm hitting my foundations, right? So, I mean, I moved to California because in Michigan, being outside wasn't the greatest thing. It wasn't possible because it's winter. It's also just, there's not very motivated people in the health world. So this might require, if you want to have the best life possible, then we should all be living in a paradise. And so if you look around in your current environment and you're like, yeah, this isn't a paradise, this is more like a city, or it's a desert, or it's winter 9 months of the year and I don't really like the winter time, then like that takes a priority shift. Like we can all move to paradises. And I did that 13 years ago. I moved to California. And I think that making sure that we're living in the most optimal environment will allow the facilitation of all of this stuff we're talking about to be easier. You know, because if you live in New York City and like there's not a blade of grass anywhere, it's going to be really hard to be connected with yourself, because we are a product of our environment and we can only be as full as the environment that we're existing in. And that's talking about the immediate environment and just the earth as a whole, we all have to start paying attention to it.
Right.
So I make sure the foundations are taken care of, and then everything on top of that is kind of just like a cherry on top. I used to view diet and exercise as the foundation, and now it's kind of like that's the extra stuff that I do. And as long as the foundation is solid, then I am my strongest self. I am my most powerful self.
So what do you suggest to clients that, like, let's say live in Canada or like live in the UK and moving for them isn't a possibility? Like, how do they get that sunlight and that air? Yeah.
I get a lot of these questions, and I usually take it upon myself to tell them, like, no, it is possible.
Yeah. Right. Through the power of like manifestation and just making it a reality.
If it's not possible, then yeah, you're correct. However, I'm telling you that it is possible. But if you don't get a lot of sunlight, like people in England, it's cloudy all the time. I mean, drive somewhere. You know, there's got to be a sunny place within 2 or 3 hours. You know, or if you live up close to mountains, if you can go up to 6,000 feet, the sun's more powerful above 6,000 feet elevation. A lot of the sun studies that I researched were in Switzerland at 10,000 feet. So even in Switzerland, it's kind of cold there, but there's a lot of, in this book that I was reading, there's a lot of the studies that came from Switzerland because they're at 10,000 feet elevation. So the sun is more powerful at elevation. However, there is energy in everything, right? So even if you are in a city, even if you are in a wintertime climate, the sun's energy is still around everywhere. It's in every single atom in existence. And so learning how to harness the sunlight in air, the sunlight in the earth, is also a practice that you can do, but it's going to start with having a meditative practice and knowing what it's like to receive energy other than through your mouth and nose, and take in energy from other mechanisms in our body besides food. I mean, air is also another one, but we can use that. But there's other mechanisms where we can take in energy, and that's going to require our body to be receptive. Speaking of feminine energy, like that's the feminine force, is the receiving force. And so because we live in such a masculine dominated world where everything's do, the masculine force is penetrative. It's like penetrating and like giving. And we can shift that over, maybe overshift it, or at least balance it at the very least, to allow ourselves to receive energy in the form of emotional states, or even just seeing beauty, just looking at a flower, right? We can get the sunlight energy just from being mesmerized by looking at a flower and receiving the beauty of it. That's a way, like, that actually gives us energy if our channels are open and we're receptive to that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's something I talk about with my members all the time, is about like, slowing down and creating beauty and surrounding yourself by beauty. Your environment, like you said, is so important to how we feel internally, and internally to externally as well. I had a couple more questions before we wrap up. Do you drink coffee?
No.
Why?
I never have. I used to work construction going through college, and everybody drank coffee, like everyone. And it was in Michigan, right? So it would be cold, and I was told, you're going to eventually drink coffee when you need to warm up. And so I think that part of my mind just kind of resisted it, also because I never needed it. But I also was just like, well, they're all telling me that I'm going to need this thing that they're all addicted to, so I'm just never going to drink it. Yeah. And so I've had like 6 or 7 cups of coffee in my life, and that's just to experiment. And it does make me happier. but it made me a little bit agitated every time I do it. And I think it's something that everyone's addicted to. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I'm totally addicted. And I just wanted to, like, once you start doing more breath work and like harnessing your energy and receiving energy, I guess your need for coffee, I'm assuming, must go down. Like, there's all these sexual teachers I listen to and read about, and they say, like, you don't need coffee, you don't need drugs when you have tapped into your life force, vitality.
Yeah, that's true. And the adrenal glands are on the kidneys. And so making sure that our organs are taken care of nutritionally and physically through movement is going to allow us to kind of kick the habits that we have, because they're not really addictions, they're just habits. But through the habits that we have, we may have worn down our organs a bit, which then makes it seem like an addiction, because the only way to get to the same feeling state is to get more of it. But really what most people are experiencing is adrenal fatigue. And that's because the coffee is stimulating your nervous system to like fire up. And if we stop drinking that, we're almost unable to operate. So it goes back to learning how to harness energy through other means to replace that. So we want to make sure that our kidneys and adrenals can replenish. And there's kriyas for this. So in the East, there's kriyas and yoga. The way that they view yoga isn't the way that we view yoga here in the West. In the West, yoga is kind of like an exercise modality. In the East, yoga is this metaphysical thing where, depending on like we view our body as a piece of technology. And so we can tune our instrument, right? So if we know how to tune our instrument, we can play our instrument at the fullest capacity. And so there's kriyas to help us tune our instrument. There's kriyas to help us use our instrument. If we know how to move our body, we know how to use our voice, we know how to breathe, we can use our body to affect our internal perception of reality and reality itself. And so there's kriyas that are specifically made for the kidneys, which will then help your adrenal glands, which will then help you kick the habit of coffee.
Oh, I might have to look those up.
Yeah, I can see if I can find some for you.
That'd be awesome.
It has a lot to do with just applying pressure. Like a lot of the yoga postures where you're kind of like twisted up, it's not to express flexibility so much as it is to put pressure on certain parts of your body, organs, energy meridians. It's like acupuncture, but instead of sticking a needle in, you're compressing a joint.
I see. Now, last question. What is what has been your most powerful psychedelic experience? And do you still currently believe in like the healing properties of psychedelics?
So this is something that I'm still working on. I think that psychedelics are powerful, and I think that they do open us up into viewing different aspects of reality. And for sure, they shift people. And then the question I have, though, is, number one, is that necessary? And number two, are we supposed to see those things? You know, does it take away from the experience? I mean, I kind of am already at a point where I have, I view myself as the character in the movie, the one watching the movie, and the one who's sort of like designing the movie all at the same time. And I feel like I already, because I have all this knowledge, my life experience is diminished a little bit because I don't have so much surprise. Everything is just kind of like, yeah, it's supposed to be like that because I made it that way. So I wonder that if you open yourself up to an experience of seeing beyond the veil, like, does the veil exist for a reason? And so all of my research, everything that I've read, everything that I've been exposed to, psychedelics aren't necessarily viewed in a positive light. However, so that's one thing. And I think it's not because it's potentially, it's not negative to your body system. We just might be transcending the capacities that we're supposed to be at. So I compare it to steroids. So my weightlifting coach, Sean Waxman, once told me, because he I think it was him, he was talking about, like, if in high school, we're talking about football, if in high school you use steroids, you'll probably make it to a college team, but you're not going to make it beyond there. But if you are able to make it to college without using steroids, then you use steroids, it'll probably bump you up another level so that you can then go into the pros.
Okay.
However, if you're able to go through high school and college and get into the pros without using steroids and then start using steroids, you'll probably be a $10 million pro. You know, so like the longer you can go without using the super juice, like basically the super juice puts a capacity on wherever you are. And I view psychedelics as almost the same way. We're maturing through our different life cycles, and we're experiencing life and consciousness on many different levels. So when we're like right now in our phase of existence, we're still like in this physical world. But once our body starts deteriorating at like 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, that's gonna allow us to experience life without so much emphasis on this physical body. And we're gonna be able to experience everything a little bit different because it's not gonna be centered around my mobility and my agility in this physical environment. It's gonna be more about just being a spectator, maybe. And I'm definitely not a spectator now. I'm always the one being spectated. So as we're going through life, we're evolving a lot. We're evolving a lot all through life. And if at one point in that journey we use the super juice, like, I don't know if it's gonna sort of put us off trail. So that's just one perspective of. So I'm not using a lot of psychedelics very much at all, because for me, it feels like a drop down from where I normally am.
Interesting. But don't you think it helped you, like the use of psychedelics probably opened you up to be where you're at right now?
So I haven't used that much. So the way that I am, most people assume that I've done DMT. They assume that I've done ayahuasca. They assume that I like do mushrooms every single weekend. I have not done DMT. I've not done ayahuasca. I've talked to many people that have. I understand what they're saying. Of course, I know that the experience of it is massively different than just conceptually knowing about it. I at 19 years old was able to like go in through like meditate down into the reality, the vibration of the earth, and like pop up in people's dreams, sort of manipulate. So I've kind of already been doing this stuff. So to answer your question, the most powerful psychedelic experience was the first time I did mushrooms, though. And that's when I really understood what psychedelics are and how we're actually uptaking the plant's consciousness. And so because I didn't use marijuana until I was 30, and I took 3 years to research what psychedelics were. And at 30 years old, I became okay with psychedelics in general. And I'm 36 now, and I really have only experimented with cannabis and mushrooms. I'm okay with everything else. I just haven't felt the calling to it. You know, I haven't felt like it's the time.
Yeah.
But the first time I did mushrooms and I could feel the forest, it was raining and I could feel the forest and the trees. And like mushroom is a fungus, right? And the mycelium is connecting the forest together. And when I could feel that consciousness inside me kind of connecting to all of the trees, and feeling the energy, it just wasn't a connection. It was actually feeling what the trees were feeling what the trees needed. And they were all super happy because they've been pouring for a week straight in the redwood forest. That's when I understood, like, okay, it's not just getting high. That's not what's happening. When you consume cannabis, smoke or eat it, you're actually consuming the properties of that plant. When you consume fungus, you're experiencing the properties of that plant. Same thing with ayahuasca. So that's kind of what I have to say about psychedelics. I think they're massively powerful, and people should just really be connected to that choice.
Right.
Because there's a lot of information out there that just says they're 100% positive or 100% negative. And it's like, it's a little bit deeper than just like good or bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you have to respect them, and there's reverence, and it takes a lot of courage, I think, to enter into that world. But what's interesting about thinning the veil is that for women, every month there's a thinning of the veil. And I feel like I drop into, especially when there's a full moon and I start menstruating, it's like it's its own psychedelic experience. Like all of my layers are peeled off, and I have to like sit with whatever's coming up. And it's a very, I don't know, I feel like that's, psychedelics has taught me that how powerful like my human experience is. And like you said, we're just all of a sudden feeling and connected. So yeah, I don't know. I think I totally was on the fence of, I assumed that you had delved into that world deeply, but you're just very much connected to spirit. So it's super cool.
All right, I'm back.
Oh yeah.
I think that it can shorten the time that, like, if you're consciously aware and meditating and observing, one psychedelic experience could make up for 10 years of doing that.
Right.
And that could be beneficial for somebody's life experience. And it can be very healing also if there's some things that have happened to you in your life that you had a hard time struggling with. I've seen psychedelics just like completely sort of change a person and make a person kind of understand and get out of that victim mode.
Totally.
Happening to you, and you can all of a sudden see that life is happening through us and not so much to us.
Right.
So definitely beneficial. I'm kind of holding off, just like, I'm still unsure though. Admittedly, I'm unsure on the answer that I gave you. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really good to explore and to approach it through, a skeptical or critical lens in a way, because we just want to take everything at face value sometimes. So anyways, Ra, I think we should finish there. And I just want to thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. And you're obviously a great teacher, and it was really interesting talking to you. And I feel like I have like a million more questions to ask you, but maybe that's for another time.
Yeah, and I love what you're doing, right? The support of the feminine and how you're doing it is important. Like, even us men, we need the feminine power to rise up, because if we just look around, the masculine oriented kind of ways of the past are not working so good. So we definitely need feminine oriented people to figure out what it means to be feminine.
Right.
Because like your generation, it was probably dominated by the masculine. And so it's like, we got the feminine power breaking through, come almost unsure about what it means to be feminine. And so there's very much feminine elders supporting the youth and supporting every other woman, if we're going to use the heteronormative structure.
Right.
Yeah, but definitely it's a powerful thing for the entire planet.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, the more that we drop into our bodies and we look inwards and we heal our own stories and experiences, like the more powerful we become united. And the systematic structures in place currently, they don't want us to know our needs. They don't want us to know our feelings, but just to like be on a roller coaster and suffer. So yeah, we got to continue this work for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what a civilization will look like with a balanced feminine and masculine order of control, and probably order of control is a masculine way of describing what it would be. But yeah, it's going to be exciting because it's happening right now.
Well, yeah, and I think it's going to be really exciting. And what's so interesting to me, though, is that, we've had civilizations where it was a complete matriarch, and that didn't work either. So it's like, I want both of us to rise up. I want that feminine power to rise up and meet each other, because we need structure. We need like that father, right, role, but we also need the mother, the maiden, the crone, all these things to kind of come together and realize that it's all important. It's all beautiful once it's harmonized. So cool shit's going on.
Yeah, awesome.
Totally. Well, thank you so much again, and have an amazing day just roaming about. I feel like you're just this fitness roamer / teacher of all things.
That's
really
right. I show up where I'm needed.
Yes, exactly. All right. Take care, Ra.
Yeah, see you later. Bye.